Hello there, happy Monday. This is Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have the My Favorite Things August 2019 card kit, my monthly hero, and as of filming this is still available. So let's go ahead and take a look at what comes inside this kit. As always, they're jam-packed with lots of great stuff, and this one is no exception. So you get 2 sheets of 5.5 by 8.5 mirror lava paper in purple and 2 sheets of parchment paper. You also get the dragon scale sequins, and then you're also going to get 3 glimmer ink pots in gold, purple, and red. These are beautiful. At first I wasn't quite sure what they were, and then you open them up and you're like, ooh, okay, ideas. I have ideas for this. And aren't those beautiful? They have this little bit of glimmer to them. And then the stamp set. The stamp set is so much fun. This is a 6x8 clear set, and I love the theme of it. It's funny, you see the images and you think, okay, all right, medieval times, and then you start to read the sentiments, and they're written medievally, but they're hilarious. So I thought those were so much fun, like happy day of thy birth. Have a magical day, of course. I thought those were fun. Just fun. All those fun images and fun sentiments. And then you're also going to get the coordinating frame dies. And so they have all the matching dies, and then they also have the castle die that kind of goes into the background. And I always put mine on a 5x7 Marietta magnet, and then I'm ready to start making stuff. All right, let's get started on card number 1. I'm going to take the castle die with the hills or clouds or whatever you want to call them. I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine with some Bristol smooth cardstock because I plan to do some ink blending on that. And I just kind of put it on the upper 1/3 of the cardstock because I thought that would be a little bit more visually appealing. And then I also ran it through using some masking paper because I wanted to have some differentiation between the castle and the hills. And so I'm cutting the castle away from the rest of the die because I need those to be 2 separate masks. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the hill die or the hill mask over those hills so that I can start ink blending. And pardon my head, I'm going to ink blend the castle to start. So I'm going to use some Distress Oxide inks along with my VIVACE Beauty brushes. And I'm going to use the colors Weathered Wood and Hickory Smoke for the castle. And I'm just using one of the smaller VIVACE Beauty brushes. I like these beauty brushes because they were like $9 or something like that. So I don't feel too bad if anything does end up happening to them. And I think I got like, I don't know, I don't even know how many, 5 brushes maybe. So it's a good buy. And then I'll move on to the Hickory Smoke on the outside edges. So I also am just using this same brush. I did kind of wipe off a little bit on a piece of scratch paper, but I'm not so worried because they're both kind of grayish colors. And then I peeled off the mask, and I'm heating this because I do want to put the castle mask over the top, and if it's wet it won't stick. So then I'll peel off the backing paper from my castle mask, and then I'll put that over the gray so that I can start doing the ink blending for the rest of the panel, which is going to be some greens. I'm using bundled sage and peeled paint. And I'm going to move on to a bigger brush, and then I'll start going from the bottom up with the bundled sage. And it works, the ink blending, these blend so beautifully anyway, but on the Bristol Smooth they blend pretty nicely, and it's really pretty effortless. Sometimes when you're blending, depending on your cardstock, you can get a real arm workout depending, but these blended really easily on this. And then I'll kind of clean that off just a little bit. I'm not so concerned because they're greens about contamination. And then I'll use the peeled paint up on the upper part and kind of bring that down. And then I'll go back in with some more peeled or bundled sage to blend those out a little bit better. And then I'll even go back into the peeled paint one more time and blend that all around the edges of my paper. I'm kind of even just grabbing it from my glass mat. So I'm doing this obviously on my glass mat. That's the Holtz glass mat. I love this thing because it's easy cleanup. And then I'll peel off my mask and we're ready for that panel to be done. And so then I'll start working on my back panel, which is another piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I have that cut down to 4¼ by 5½ inches, so it'll take up the whole front of an A2 size card. I'll clean that off, and then I'll start pulling down some tumbled glass, just on the edges mostly, because I thought about doing some clouds, but then I just thought, we'll just bring down the blue sky. And then I have a little bit of a white in there so that it's not just stark blue and stark white. It's blended out pretty nicely. And I don't have to do the entire panel because it's covered up by the other. Moving on to my stamping, I just grabbed 4 images from the stamp set, and I have some Express It cardstock, and I put this into my Misti, and I'm going to stamp that with my Memento Tuxedo black ink. I don't show you the coloring because it's fairly simple coloring. These are small images, and this video is already going to be fairly long just with 3 cards, but I do alcohol marker coloring, and I'm using my Arteza Everblend markers, which are really nice. I'm enjoying those. And then I'm going to tape down the coordinating dies just using a piece of washi tape. And then these are nice images because they're small. So for me, I like that I could run them through my Sizzix Sidekick, but because everything's on the one piece of paper, I just decided instead of cutting that down, and because I can have my die cutting machine on my desk next to me, I just ran it all through at once. Then I decided for my sentiment, I was just going to stamp that right onto another scrap piece of cardstock, but I started off with that banner, and there's also a matching die with that, which is really cool. And then I'll stamp my sentiment on there. And I thought about trying to curve it a little bit, but it just, honestly, it's been a bit of a week, so just wanted to stamp. So I just stamped it down. I send the warmest wishes. I don't know why. I just have to crack up when we put if on the end of things, and the when we're talking about like you. And then I'm going to cover the back of my castle and the back of my panel with some foam tape. I'm using the Brutus Monroe 1/16 inch foam tape. And I really like this stuff, but I'm finding that I think I like it a whole lot better just for covering up the whole panel of a background. If I want my background to really all be popped up, this stuff is fantastic for that. It does tear, and it cuts nicely, and the backing paper comes off fairly easily, but it's just a little, because it's very sticky, it's just a little bit easier to use if you're just wanting to cover up a whole background, kind of like I did there. And then I'll stick that down onto my card panel there. I decided to just use liquid glue to stick down my sentiment, and I did use a little bit of alcohol marker on that as well to give it some dimension. And then I have that sticking off just a little. For my little knight, I'm going to put some liquid glue on him and stick him down to the front, and then I'll use some more of those alcohol markers to kind of give him a little bit of shadowing so that it doesn't look like he's just floating on the card. I will end up saving the rest of those last 3 images for my other 2 cards. But yeah, I'm just going to add some to make it look like he is walking along that grass, like he's just maybe left the castle. He's on a mission. I don't know why. These are just cute images. I haven't seen anything too much like them, so they're fun. And then I did cut that panel down already after I'd had the tape on it, so it was kind of not the smartest. I put it through one of my small guillotine trimmers, and so it did end up messing up that edge, but I work with it. So I grab the gold metallic paint or glimmer paint that came in the kit, and I just rub it across the edge, and I love that look. I thought that turned out, I was able to salvage the piece and no big deal. And so then I have this white panel on the side, so it's just a little bit different, but then I also have that gold glimmer paste or gold glimmer paint on the edges, and I really think that's fun. So then I'll use liquid glue to adhere that down to my card panel, or my card base, which is just some heavyweight white cardstock. And then once that's on there, that'll finish off this card. I like how that one turned out. A lot more fun by adding that glimmer paint to the side. So there you go. Moving on to card number 2, we're going to go ahead and make a shaker. As I said before, this is a little bit of a week, so my mind wasn't necessarily on creativity. So I know that I've done a lot of shakers and other things recently, but they're kind of my go-to, kind of love them, and so you might see them a little bit more often. But anyway, to make my background, I pulled out those glimmer paints, and I've never used these before, but I thought, let's see what we can do with our tonic glass, or not glass mat, but the tonic easy clean mat. So I took a paintbrush for the red one and the purple one, and I just kind of spritz those around a little bit just using my paintbrush, and then I am going to spritz those with some water, just a little bit, kind of get those paints moving a little bit. I'm not sure if these even react this way at all. And I used the Arteza Expert watercolor paper that I recently got. Not the 100% cotton, but the other Expert paper that's a little bit more affordable. And I gotta say, I really loved the way this looked on the paper. It almost made it look like it had different cells. And I'm not sure, I'm assuming it's because it's the paint and the paper combo together, because I did try it on some Strathmore watercolor paper and didn't get that same look. So here I am using it on the Strathmore watercolor paper, and just to see, and it's reacting the way paints normally do on that watercolor paper. So I don't know, I thought that was really cool. So I grabbed some of the gold, and then I'm going to heat set my page, because I didn't quite do that yet, and I didn't want that to mix, because when you have gold and purple, you're probably going to get a little bit of brown. But these sat nicely on top of each other, which was cool. So once that was dry, I spritzed that with water, and I end up really loving the way this background looks. I don't use it for anything in this, but I do like the way it looks, and I love how that gold just kind of sits on top of the paper. So as I said, going to make a shaker card. So I am using my large pinking circles from Nestabilities. These are old. I don't even know if those are available anymore, but I mean, I still have them in my stash, so I'm going to use them. And then I have some transparency film. This is, and I'm using it as acetate. You would not, and ask me how I know, you would not want to heat this acetate or this transparency film, because if you do, it will definitely melt. So I'm just using it because I have a bunch of it. I'm using it for my shakers. And I use the Ranger Multimedia Matte. I know typically it's probably better to use like a dry adhesive, but I like using that liquid glue because it does give me a little bit of wiggle room, and it does still dry quickly. So I've doubled up my foam tape, and then I'm peeling off both the front and back of that backing paper so that I can manipulate this around that circle. This is nothing new. If you leave it, the backing paper on one side, you're not going to get it to be able to bend as easily, so you peel it off both. And I'm just making sure that those seams are really close together. It just seemed like an obvious thing to do with that dragon scale confetti that I figured, or sequins, or whatever they're wanting to call them. It just seemed like the obvious thing to do would be to make a shaker. So I covered the rest of the background with the doubled up foam tape. And then I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of my Ranger Multimedia Matte so that I have a little bit of wiggle room with putting down my card base. And my card base is some light gray cardstock that I have. This is from Brutus Monroe, called Sidewalk. I just thought that would be kind of nice as a background. And then I'll just stick that right on top, and then I will make sure and push that down really, really well. Flip it over and do the same thing, and then we're ready to do some shaking. And I did the seams pretty well because none of that was coming out. Now I'll adhere the two pieces that I colored previously, the dragon and my little knight that looks like he's ready to slay him. Or maybe they're dancing, whatever you want to call it. And then I'll cover that back with some Ranger Multimedia Matte to adhere those down to the front. And then I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I grab one of it's the single banner. I'll stamp that down onto the parchment paper that came in the kit. And then I'm going to stamp my sentiment, and this one just says Warmest Wishes, because on the inside I'm going to stamp Happy Day of Thy Birth. I love that. I think this would be a fun card to send to one of my nephews. I think they'd get a kick out of it for their birthday. So I'll stamp that on the inside using that same Memento Tuxedo black ink. And then I'll adhere down the sentiment on the front just using that same liquid glue that I've been using. And then to finish it off, I decide to use that gold glimmer paint one more time because I love the way that looks. If I'd been thinking, I would have done this before sticking it down or before making my shaker, but I wasn't thinking. So I'm just using my paintbrush. And this is just a cheap paintbrush from Walmart, I think. And it gives it that little bit of a brush stroke. And I like that look. It looks good. I can imagine it would look really good on the parchment paper that came in the kit as well. So I'll just do that all around the outside edges of my card. And then that will finish off card number 2. So yeah, we got a shaker. And then we'll move on to card number 3 here in a second. Moving on to card number 3, I'm going to be doing the confetti glitter technique that I did in a video just last week. As I told you, it was a little bit of a week, so I'm not doing a whole lot in the way of total creativity. And when I saw those dragon scales, I thought, well, this would be perfect for the technique I just did. So head back to my channel if you didn't see that and you'd like to see more stuff like this, because there is a whole video on it. Alright, so I'm starting off with some 2-inch score tape, and I'm just putting this down on a piece of white cardstock. I've done 2 layers of it, and I'm going to trim that down because I plan to use my Labels 6 nestabilities. I don't know if that's still available. I just thought it looked a little bit like a cloud. This is an old nestabilities as well, so I'm going to run that through my Big Shot machine, and then I will have this piece of cardstock that has score tape on the one side, and then I will get ready to do the technique. So I'm going to grab a coffee filter, and then I will peel off the backing paper on just one of those. I'm going to start with just one, and I'm going to hang on to that paper because I'm going to need that to burnish. So I'll pour the dragon scales all over that piece, and then I'm going to rub that around with my finger lightly, trying to get that to flatten out, and then get all the excess loose pieces to just come off of there. I'll even rub the edges and just keep rubbing until I'm happy with that. And then I'll eventually take that paper, my backing paper, and I'll put that right back down, and then I'm going to burnish that down. That's one way to get even more of those dragon scales off that don't belong, and to make sure that the pieces that are there will stick to the score tape really nicely. I'll peel off the other piece, and then I'll repeat the process of, trying to push those dragon scales into the score tape, just using my fingers. Try not to rub away any of the stickiness, and then once again take that backing paper and then burnish the rest of those in as well. And then I'll make sure that I have any of the excess that come off, and then I'll take those and put those back in the paper or in my little container. And then I'm going to use some Arteza Aquamarine glitter. This comes from a set of 54 glitters. And then I'm going to take the one pot that has the sprinkle side, and I'll sprinkle that all over, and that ends up filling in all of those pieces in between. So it's kind of like that concept of the rocks and the sand in a glass jar. You fill it in with rocks, and then you can take sand and fill it in even more. And then you've got this really pretty background that uses those dragon scales and a little bit of glitter. So now I'll start adhering all the pieces for my card. I had cut down some of that lava cardstock down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm using liquid glue to adhere that down to some of the parchment that I cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. So that leaves a little bit of a border. And then I'm going to adhere that down to just a white card base. This is just a heavyweight white card base that's a top folding A2 size card. And then I will once again take that liquid glue and use that on my little background piece. So this way, this will stick very, very nicely to the front of that card. Just centering that as best I can. And I use liquid glue because it does give me a little bit of wiggle room, because I don't often get things down straight. If you've watched any of my videos, I think you know that. I did put some foam tape on the back of my last little image that I colored, which is that cute little unicorn. And then I'm going to stamp the sentiment, which is "Have a Magical Day." And then I'll trim that down and even give that a bit of a flag banner. And I'm eyeballing this. I didn't do the best job eyeballing it. Instead of cutting right into the center and then going from the sides to that center, I just cut in. And it worked okay. And then I covered that with some foam tape on the back. And then that's going to finish off card number 3. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 3 cards that I made today. I would love to know if you have a favorite out of the 3 that I made. I will have everything that I used listed down below in the description box in case you're interested in anything, and if it's still available, it will definitely be listed. And go ahead and hit that like button if you liked the video, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by.